Whereas William the Conqueror's invasion of England in 1066 had been well planned and ruthlessly executed, the Norman invasion of Ireland over 100 years later began as quite a casual affair. In the 12th century, Ireland was divided into several small kingdoms, and there was continual fighting between the rulers of these kingdoms, each wanting to become the High King or ruler of all Ireland, and often different leaders would join forces to strengthen their position. Ireland was mainly a rural country, but there were a number of Viking-made ports, such as Dublin, Cork, and Limerick. The reason for the Normans arriving in Ireland is a result of a long-standing feud between two kings, Dermot MacMurrough of Leinster and Tiernan O'Rourke of Breffni. The two of them were always on opposite sides, and when O'Rourke joined forces with another king, Dermot MacMurrough was driven out of Ireland. With a few followers, he sailed away and landed at Bristol in England. Dermot wanted his land back, but he knew he would need help. He set off to find the king, Henry II. That wasn't an easy job. Henry was always on the move and spent most of his life on the continent. Eventually, Dermot caught up with him. The king was too busy dealing with problems in France to worry about Ireland at the time, so he accepted Dermot's offer of loyalty and told him he had permission to get support from his English barons. Dermot decided that the most likely place to find volunteer support would be in South Wales, where the Norman barons were continually at war with the native Welsh. Dermot went to Pembroke Castle and met with Richard Fitzgilbert de Clare, the Earl of Strigoi, but we know him better as Strongbow. Strongbow was out of favour with the king and on the lookout for a wife, and the opportunities that Ireland had to offer interested him. He agreed to lead an armed force to Ireland to fight for Dermot, but Dermot had to make two promises to Strongbow. First, that he could marry Dermot's daughter Aoife, and secondly, that on Dermot's death he would inherit Leinster. In 1167, Dermot MacMurrough and a handful of Normans landed in County Wexford. Although he took control of the local area, he was attacked again by O'Connor and O'Rourke, but after giving O'Rourke 100 ounces of gold, Dermot was allowed to stay in Leinster. However, he was only biding his time and sent messages to Wales offering titles and land for those who would come to his aid.
Gold and silver I shall give them, a very ample pay. Whoever may wish her soil or sod, richly shall I endow them.
At Baginbun, County Wexford, in 1170, an advance guard of Normans landed. It is said that there were just 10 knights and 70 archers. They set up camp and protected it by digging trenches and piling up earth and stones and branches. A large army of locals attacked. The knights, thinking all that they could do was die bravely, fought on. They drove a herd of cattle against the oncoming troops and charged them. About 500 were killed, and many were thrown over the cliffs. This was a demonstration of the Normans' supremacy at war. An old rhyme goes,
At the creek of Baginbun, Ireland was lost and won.
Shortly afterwards, Strongbow arrived. Waterford was captured, and he married Dermot's daughter. They marched on and captured Dublin, eventually overpowering Rory O'Connor, the High King, close to the walls of Dublin. When Dermot MacMurrough died in 1171, Strongbow became King of Leinster. Strongbow's next problem was King Henry II. Now, Henry was quite prepared to see his subjects risk their lives in adventures west, but he did not want to see Ireland ruled by Strongbow, as it might threaten his security. So in 1171, Henry landed in Waterford. All of the Irish chieftains and Strongbow realized that they must show the king loyalty, and the Irish Archbishop of Dublin, Lawrence O'Toole, organized a peaceful settlement. According to this, all parties must recognize the king as their overlord. Strongbow was given Leinster. Hugh de Lacy of Ludlow was brought in by the king and given Meath to keep an eye on Strongbow. Rory O'Connor was made High King of all the unconquered areas of Ireland, so long as he paid money to the king each year. Strongbow helped Lawrence O'Toole to construct a new cathedral, Christ Church Cathedral in Dublin. Today in the cathedral you can see the effigy of a knight, said to be Strongbow's tomb. There is also a chapel dedicated to Lawrence O'Toole. He is buried in Normandy, but his heart was brought back to his cathedral in Dublin. In Meath, Hugh de Lacy based himself at Trim on the River Boyne. At the time, his castle was the largest in Ireland. It was meant to be impressive. Hugh de Lacy made himself secure in Meath and made Trim the headquarters of his lordship. On his many manors, de Lacy had English tenants producing grain and Irish tenants rearing cattle. Meath was peaceful and prosperous. At the mouth of the River Boyne is Drogheda. Although it had been a Viking port, the de Lacys developed it. They built a fort on the hilltop and built a town on either side of the river connected by bridges and ferries. The harbour allowed Meath to trade right across Europe. It was protected by strong walls and impressive gates. When de Lacy first went to Meath, it was the most disorderly province in Ireland. He built a number of motte and bailey forts, which are basically wooden forts on mounds of earth, and gradually he took control. The Normans started to spread through Ireland. Again, their progress tended to be a bit haphazard. As a general rule, they left the hill country, woods and boglands to the native Irish, and the Normans stayed on the plains, coasts and rivers. The middle of Ireland was mostly bogland, and to keep control of it, Henry II ringed it with castles to keep his land safe. The government also recognized the importance of the River Shannon. It weaves itself through the heart of Ireland. At the mouth of the Shannon is Limerick, a Viking creation. At the end of the 12th century, a royal castle was erected. The towers guarded the entrance not only to Limerick, but to the whole River Shannon. Having reached the Shannon, the Normans spread in a number of directions. Some moved into Kerry, others into Cork, but some decided to go north. In 1177, John de Courcy, a young Norman knight originally from Somerset, collected 22 knights and about 300 soldiers from a Dublin garrison, and under the de Courcy family banner, headed for Ulster. Ulster has natural defences in Carlingford Lough and the Mournes. It was easy for the natives to ambush travellers in the mountain passes. It was winter when de Courcy and his men crossed the mountains, and they took the Ulster men by surprise. After many battles with the local leader Rory MacDunleavy, de Courcy captured Downpatrick, which was then the capital of Ulster. De Courcy brought over Cistercian monks from Lancashire to set up an abbey in Ulster. We know it as Inch Abbey. The abbey showed the first examples in Ireland of Gothic architecture, with its tall windows and pointed arches. When de Courcy arrived in Ulster, Belfast was just a crossing place where the river was shallow enough to be waded across. Around the open countryside, de Courcy erected mottes at Dundonald, Knock, and Mount Pottinger, or Pottinger's Mott. The main settlement on what is now Belfast Lough was where there was a deep water harbour, Carrickfergus. De Courcy had a stone castle built, and Carrickfergus became the base of the Earldom of Ulster. The castle has been added to and changed over the years. It continued in use as a castle occupied by the army until 1928. The Great Square Keep dates back to De Courcy's time, and it not only overlooked and secured the lough, but also stood as an advertisement to show who was the power in the land. Carrickfergus was more than a castle. It was a walled town. The town grew into a place where merchants could safely trade. De Courcy introduced coins to Ulster. They were minted at Carrickfergus. If Downpatrick was the religious centre of De Courcy Ulster, Carrickfergus was the business centre and the headquarters for his army. Although De Courcy ruled the land, he did not have any power at sea. The main power in the North Irish Sea were the Norsemen of the Isle of Man. De Courcy married the daughter of the king of the Isle of Man, Africa. A story says that one day Africa, returning to Ulster after visiting her father, was caught in a rough storm and vowed that if she survived, she would found an abbey. Grey Abbey was her thanksgiving. It is thought that it was never quite as grand as she had intended. The reason was that the De Courcys were booted out of Ulster.
You see, the government of King John wanted to bring order and stability to all of Ireland. De Courcy got in the way. He ignored the king's orders and behaved as if he were independent. The government gave the de Lacys of Meath permission to take over Ulster.
In 1204, a son of Hugh de Lacy, also called Hugh, became Earl of Ulster. The De Courcys fled the country. Shortly after, King John fell out with all his Irish barons, and in 1210 he brought an army to Ireland to teach them a lesson. The de Lacys, Walter in Meath and Hugh in Carrick, did not do as they were told. King John ousted both of them, and for several years he had control of Meath and Ulster. One of his knights built a castle on a natural mound called Mount Sandal. Beneath it, the town of Coleraine grew up. After the king's death, de Lacy recovered the earldom of Ulster, and he set about strengthening his defences. He built a number of castles like this one on the north shore of Carlingford Lough, standing proud to let everyone know that the Earl of Ulster meant business. He built another magnificent castle at Dundrum. Although the water was too shallow to make a seaport, the castle guarded a narrow strip of land which went round the edge of the Mournes. John de Courcy had built a defensive wall there, but King John had overpowered it. Hugh de Lacy made a much stronger castle. The round tower was a step forward in Norman building design. It was harder to construct than a square one, but more sturdy. Missiles slid off the curve, and there were no edges to crumble away. All the castles in the north of Ireland were close to the sea, whereas in the south they ventured further inland, intended to control the land. In Ulster, the castles were just footholds, secure because they could be supplied by sea, but they could not serve to conquer the north. The Normans pushed north, building strongholds in Limavady and as far along the coast as Inishowen. Near the end of the 13th century, the de Burgh family took control of the earldom of Ulster, and they continued to control the central areas. William de Burgh was responsible for a castle at Dunluce. Although the castle remains, what we see today dates from much later, though it is thought that the round towers might be from the original structure. You can't get much closer to the coast than this. The earldom of Ulster prospered for over a century until it got caught up in the wars between the English and the Scots. The King of England used a continuous supply of Irishmen in his armies. The Earl of Ulster at the time, Richard de Burgh, contributed his men, even though his daughter Elizabeth was married to Robert the Bruce, the Scottish king. Bruce felt he could stop the flow of men to the English armies by taking over, or at least weakening, Ulster. He sent his brother Edward to invade Ulster. He landed near Larne and attacked Carrickfergus. For several years he rampaged and destroyed. Eventually he was defeated and killed, but the earldom never really recovered. The Normans conquered England and Wales. In a way they conquered Scotland too, as Robert the Bruce was of Norman stock. But they were never able to take full control of Ireland, and therefore a fully controlled nation didn't evolve. Throughout Ireland, there are many signs that the Normans came, even if they didn't conquer.